Now we will set up our MIDI controller so that we can use it with MIDI tracks in Ableton Live. So I am using an Ableton Push, and to be honest, the Push is pretty much plug and play, meaning once you turn it on and connect it with a USB cable, everything's going to just kind of work right out of the box. But if you have any other MIDI controller from a different manufacturer, a different developer, you'll need to just double check and make sure that MIDI is flowing into Live, and we'll go through how to do that very quickly. So we're going to go into the preferences or settings menu again. I'm just going to hit Command comma to open that up. And if we go down here to the link, tempo, and MIDI tab, we're going to focus down here on this input ports and output ports section here, particularly the input ports. So what our goal is for today is we want to be able to use our MIDI controller to send MIDI notes into Ableton Live. So we're focusing on the input ports. Output ports have more to deal with if you're sending MIDI information out of Live, maybe to external hardware gear like drum machines or synthesizers or something like that. So we won't really worry too much about that today. So you can see here my Ableton Push 3 shows up. It happens to have two input ports, a user port and an external port. If you see multiple input ports for your connected MIDI controller, that's okay. If for some reason you don't see your MIDI controller showing up on this list, do make sure that it's powered on and that it's connected to your computer with a USB cable. And you should then see it show up on the list here. But assuming it's showing up and all is right, then you can go over here. We've got a few different checkboxes: track, sync, remote, and MPE. For today, all you really need to do is turn on track, and just turn track on just to be safe. Turn it on next to any inputs you see for your MIDI controller. If there are multiple, like I have here, just turn track on for all of them. What that means when we turn this track button on is that we will be able to send MIDI note and pitch bend and just other information from our mod wheel, for example. Basically, we can send MIDI notes into the tracks in Ableton Live, and that's what we want. Sync is more for syncing to external gear, which is a bit beyond the focus of today. Remote means that if your MIDI controller has knobs or faders, you can actually custom map those with the input settings here. I'm not going to be doing that today, so I'm going to leave that off. And then if you have a MIDI controller that supports MPE, which stands for MIDI Polyphonic Expression, you can turn that on as well. The Ableton Push 3 does support MPE, and certain newer MIDI controllers do. Not all of them do. If you're not sure, though, you can just leave it off and you'll be totally fine. I'm going to turn it on for my push. MPE means I can do things like pitch bend on individual notes and do note slides and things like that. It supports aftertouch and just some additional things that we can use for expression control when playing. Like I said, if you're not sure, you can just turn it off. Track is going to work just fine for us today. So with those settings on, we can close the preferences. The next thing we'll want to do is make sure we have a MIDI instrument loaded onto a MIDI track. I have the drum rack still here on track 1, but now I've gone and I've loaded some samples onto it. Then we're going to record arm the track, and once the track is record armed, if we start hitting some notes, we should start to hear the samples trigger. If I go down here, I have on my second MIDI track a bass instrument. This is just an Ableton operator synth that I've loaded a bass preset onto, and if I record arm that track, I can start playing notes, and I can actually hear pitches because this is an instrument that's actually playing notes, whereas the drum rack is a sample-based machine that is triggering different samples based on our MIDI notes. And that's how we can set up our MIDI controllers for use in Ableton Live.